The Real Estate Story with Adrian Butera.
Hi everybody, Adrian Butera is my name and welcome to The Real Estate Story here live in our West Footscray studio. I'm delighted, excited to have with me here today two very special friends and two well-known auctioneers within our country, Damien Cooley from Cooley Auctions and Harry Lee, Australasian Auctioneering Champion. They're friends of mine and I'm excited that they've popped along to say yes to the Real Estate Story podcast here today. Welcome along, gentlemen. I've got Damien, you're there on Zoom. Welcome along, Damien.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for having me today.
Mate, it's a pleasure. And Harry got you over there. Say hello to everybody.
Hey guys, and good to be here, Adrian. Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for coming along. Really, really excited to have you along here today. Well, I just wanted to start things off by not only introducing the boys, but getting them to introduce themselves, because it's important that everybody gets to know, and they both do very different roles from Victoria to New South Wales. So I'll start off with Damien. Damien, give us a bit of an insight to Cooley Auctions and what you do up there in New South Wales.
Adrian, so we started our auction company back in 2003. So we've been auctioning for quite some time now, and the business, as I guess, has evolved like most businesses do over that time. And in the peak of our career, we were calling sort of circa 6,000 auctions a year for the company. In fact, I think the most auctions that I ever called in a 12-month period was just over 2,300 personally. So volume is significant. We're obviously, all we do is conduct auctions. So I guess one of the differences maybe between like our business and what listeners in Victoria may well be used to is that we just do auctions. So I am legally a real estate agent, but I don't perform the role of a real estate agent in that, we list and sell houses. We literally just turn up and are involved on auction day. And in Sydney, where our offices are, we also focus a lot on in-room auctions, and being able to call more than 2,000 auctions a year, you obviously need to have a good in-room auction profile, and that's what we've really built over the past 15 or more years. So I love it. I love being an auctioneer. When you introduced Harry and you said he was the Australasian Auctioneering Champion, it was like another dagger in the chest because he beat me. And he's a very, very good auctioneer. But it's fun, being an auctioneer is a lot of fun. And our businesses have done incredibly well over that period. Maybe one of the places where people might know me or recognise me the most is for my involvement on the block. And I've been lucky enough to win the block 5 times. And I won't tell you how many times I've been in it because then my clearance rate isn't that flash. But I'll just hang my hat on the fact that I've won it 5 times.
I think take that, mate. 5 times is pretty good.
Pretty sure that's the record, right?
I reckon it is. It is the record, and it's great to see you on doing the block because it's great auctioneering, if I can say that, and it's a real spectacle. I must say that it's gotten to the point, I think I watched the first few series of the block, but it's now gotten to the point where I only, if I'm available, just watch auction day. I don't think I watch anything else. That's give it that I'm the auctioneer. Harry, I'm going to come back to you, Damien. I've got a lot more questions to ask. Harry, give us an insight into your business. What do you do?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a real estate practitioner, lister and seller. Started in 2005 as a junior agent coming straight out of high school. Tried to progress the ranks. In 2011, I had the opportunity to take over an existing real estate business that I was working for at the time, in which I did auctioneering. Didn't come into the picture until about 2007, 2008. It was towards the end of the year of 2007. And it was more out of passion and a little bit of necessity because there were actually no auctioneers to help me do my auctions because my area that I was working in weren't conducting auctions, and I had a kind of fondness of the actual process itself. So to this day, the business is still in operation. ICL Group in Springvale, which is about 28 kilometres southeast of Melbourne. We do predominantly most of our business there, but local surrounds as well. And the auction side of it certainly has become more prominent. However, nowhere near the volumes, of course, with Damien and the numbers, astronomical numbers, I should say, that is conducted.
It's big numbers, isn't it?
Yes, it's big numbers. I don't think I've conducted 12,000 in my life, even if you include all my training sessions. So In terms of pure auctioneering, it's just one of those things that I just wanted to develop, add as a skill set. Certainly, once again, passion led me to go further and learn more. But every day, even till today, I'm a lister and seller.
Harry, you've been auctioneering for how long?
So my first auction that I've ever conducted was 27, 28, so call it 12, 13 years.
Yep.
However, in terms of taking it seriously, because when I did my first auction and my second auction, there was probably a bit of a gap between there as well. So probably full-time auctioneering, all my listings, company listings, was probably since 2009. So 11 years, seriously.
Yeah, great. Now, before I go to Damien and quiz him a little bit, tell me about taking auctioneering seriously.
Yep.
What does that mean?
Well, I think no matter what you do, you've got to have focus. And when you spend so much, listing and selling requires a different, I guess, craft to then just auctioneering itself. There's two areas of expertise and skill sets that you need that sometimes complement each other, but sometimes are contrasting as well. And I find that when it comes to auctioneering, there's different things that you've got to train on. There's different things you've got to learn. Certainly, it's a lot more public, whereas when you're dealing with clients one-on-one, there's a different, I guess, facet to that as well. So for me, when it came to training seriously, I got involved with the competition side because I wanted to learn a lot more. And so training seriously meant actually training almost every single day. I think we can explore that later, but certainly I want to take it and make it a true profession alongside, not just as something on the side, but alongside my actual listing and selling business.
So when we talk about taking it seriously and develop it even further, does that mean further competitions? We're going to talk about competitions in a moment.
Yeah, look, I took it as, for me, listing more auctions, because once again, I was in an area that weren't conducting auctions at all. And then also to looking at what the best were doing, and people like Damien who are competing very early on. I got to witness him the first time in the first competition, or Australasian competition I ever attended, and saw him perform, and it was phenomenal there as well. And for me, I saw that as the benchmark. I'll go, well, look, if you want to be an auctioneer, that's the benchmark you should aim for, because anything less is just inadequate, not just for ourselves, but for our clients.
Damien, you're a competing auctioneer, and as much as auctioneering is your business and your brand, can I ask you a few questions about competition? When was your first competition? When did you first start competing?
Oh, that's a good question. The answer to that question is I actually don't know officially when it was, but I absolutely started in competitions very early in my career. And the reason why I did was because I really saw it as a springboard to use those awards for my clients to use those awards in the living rooms of mums and dads and families and people who are selling their properties, to say, this is the auctioneer that we use and these are the awards that this person has won. And I always saw that as really a great marketing strategy for my clients. So I competed in the New South Wales competition for many, many years before I eventually won it. And I was competing against auctioneers like Scott Kennedy Green and other company-based auctioneers in New South Wales who were really tough competition. And I didn't win a competition for quite some time. And as a result of making it to finals and eventually winning those competitions, I managed to get myself to the Australasian Auctioneering Competition. But to this day, it's been the one competition that I'm yet to win. So I had a long time off, and that was probably my own doing, in that I got so concentrated on running a company and so concentrated on just trying to be a great auctioneer and I guess trying to put food on the table and buy investment properties, and now I've got 3 young kids, and I kind of feel like I've got a little bit more time maybe now to direct back into those competitions. So I'm excited about getting back involved.
Did I just hear that correctly, that Damien's getting back involved in the auctioneering competitions? Is that what you said,
You
mate?
heard that correctly. You heard that correctly. Yep. But you know what? I've got to make it to the New South Wales final before I can think of anything further. I think that it's like in AFL, right? They talk about just concentrating on your next game. You got to concentrate on the next game. Don't worry about the GF.
I think I reckon there'd be some people out there that if they know that you're going in it, they're gonna pull out, mate. They're not going to go into it.
Mate, I hope they do. It'll give me a better chance.
No, it's great. So you've done a lot of auctions in your career, and tell everybody about the in-room auction concept. Now, when I say tell everybody, there's a lot of Victorians that are not familiar with the in-room auction concept, and I guess largely across Australia, that's not as common as on sites, but maybe it is, and I'm not fully learned of it all. But yeah, give us an insight into the in-room auctions.
Yeah, I guess there's two places that you can, well, three really now, places that you can conduct auctions. One of them is out the front of the house, and we traditionally call those on-site auctions. Another type of auction is what we call is our in-room auctions, where traditionally that might be called at a venue, could be at a hotel, could be at the agent's office. We throw another one into the mix now, or as our online auctions. So, but the in-room auctions, ordinarily they're done at a venue or at a hotel. We have a venue in Sydney called the Damien Auction House. That's our premier auction venue, which is in Double Bay in Sydney. And we run multiple auctions on any given night. We have one night per week, which is every Tuesday at 6 p.m, which is we call our independent night. And that means that any agent can list their property for auction on that evening, and I'm the auctioneer on that night. And we could have anywhere between 3 or 4 or 5 properties up to, the week before Easter. You'll be surprised to hear how many we had booked in on that night.
How many?
We had 47 auctions.
So
Wow.
the pin got pulled? Did they get to auction?
Have a guess how many that we actually ended up calling on that night?
Jesus.
Virtually, I don't know. Couple?
One.
Wow.
One auction.
What was the clearance rate like?
But it wasn't good. It wasn't good. But, so the in-room auctions, to give the viewers, I guess, an understanding of what an in-room auction is that on-site auction there's a lot of theatre that's involved. That same theatre is actually in the room. We love the in-room auctions because we can have multiple properties on one night. If we register all of our bidders, it's a legal requirement in New South Wales to register a bidder for an auction. So the good thing for us is that we feel that we have a lot of control over the environment that we're selling in. We also feel that, if one property only has one buyer, and another property has 3 and another property has 10, we set the order of sales strategically to create the mood for the evening, maybe protect some properties that may only have one buyer or in some instances no buyers. And we like to try and keep a bit of a crowd towards the end. So if we know we've got a better auction, we might also hang that out towards the end of the order of sale to keep that room environment feeling good. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, particularly when you've got multiple different agents auctioning on the night. There is always a bit of a tussle for the positions in the order of sale. So there's
how does that work? How do you pick who gets the order of sale?
It's based on a few things. We always try and do the right thing by the property. That's a primary focus. So, okay, where's the property best suited in the order of sale? And then we take other things into consideration, like we might have one agent, for example, that has 4 or 5 listings on that night, and they might need a little bit of time in between their properties to make sure that they can run them.
Sign it up, negotiate it, whatever the case is.
All of that.
Yep.
Yeah. So every order of sale, unfortunately, is different, but it all seems to work out really well in the wash. And although the agents compete against each other, we find that on auction night there's a really strong common level of respect. Everyone's there to do the best job for their vendor, and the buyers also like it because they see it as like, I guess, the professional environment where they're coming to transact the property. Traditionally, a lot of people have said that, they're so much more emotional on site. And there is definitely an argument for that people feel that they're there to buy the property, they're emotional about it, and that they might potentially pay more on site. Well, we find that same emotion has been built up during the open for inspections. And sometimes being in that room environment, when they're bidding against somebody else and being so close to that other buyer, that same energy and that same, I guess, confidence about wanting to buy can really play out in the room. So, I mean, there's plenty of good quality property that's sold on location, and there's plenty of good places that have sold in the rooms.
Yeah, I've been to your rooms. I've never, not whilst an auction was happening. It's in a lovely room. It's got a great feel about it. You've got the sign-up rooms at the back there, and I think I could just imagine the buzz when you've got a great order of sale and buyers coming and going and the stairs up and down the stairs. I could just imagine that, and one day I will promise you that I will get there. Harry, I want to ask you now, because there's a lot of people that have heard both me, you and Damien just briefly touch on competitions.
Yep.
And I still to this very day get people say to me, what are competitions? What do you mean? Explain that to me. For our listeners, could you explain what an auction competition looks like?
Sure. Well, look, competitions are generally held by the Real Estate Institute. Every state, as I'm aware, has their own competition. They have novice levels and also senior levels. So based on, of course, level, skill and experience, there are sectors there. In terms of the conduct of the auction, I think most of the formalities and how you'll conduct an auction in competition as in contrasting to on the street, I mean, the technicalities are the same. However, of course, there's different nuances and different things to understand when it comes to competitions. And they include, first and foremost, to try to keep it even, there's an actual script involved for all competitors, because ultimately you want to make sure for any competition that it is fair for everyone, that everyone gets, I guess, the same, dealt the same deck of cards ultimately, and is to see and test the person's ability to be able to handle the situation on the spot. I think, doing it in front of maybe customers and clients, you feel sometimes little bit less pressure because the fact that you're not being 100% critiqued. Whereas, of course, in a competition arena, you're being critiqued by your fellow peers, by judges, of course, that are, of course, assessing your performance. And then also, too, you actually have this end goal in mind, a prize at the end of it, to think, you almost put your own pressure on yourself to think, I want to win this. I want to get this done. I want to add this trophy to my cabinet. Or I want to add this accolade or award so I can build my own profile. And I think that sometimes we put our own pressures, but if we just focus on the actual event and treat it as a single individual, independent event away from actually with the accolades behind it, I think it's a really fun environment.
When you talk about judges, how many judges typically in a competition?
Look, it varies from state to state, but there'll be minimum 3, but it can go up to probably 5 or 6. I do find that during the heats, so there are 2 components. There's the heats where all the competitors enter. That could range from a dozen auctioneers all the way up to 2-3 dozen, depending which state and territory you're in. Then it gets narrowed down to 4 or 5 competitors to compete in a final. Generally, this is held the next day, so very little preparation time. You may find 3 judges for the heats, but may find there could be 4 or 5 for the actual final itself. Bidders, of course, they're all determined by whoever writes the script and creates the scenario, and that could be from anywhere from 3 to 6 to 7. I've seen even more than that as well, depending on, I guess, what challenges they want to bring about.
And we were talking beforehand, and I was reminded that my first competition, you were 7 years old, which is really making me feel old in this environment with you 2 blokes. But it's great to get an insight from that. What about the Australasian competition? I was about to say this year. Last year, the Australasians were in Melbourne, and it was great to have them here. Hotly contested once again. You were actively involved. Tell everybody about that.
Yeah, well, I thought last year's competition was one of the best I've ever seen. I mean, everyone, look, you're talking about some of the best auctioneers and practitioners in the whole of Australia and New Zealand. So, especially the final, whoever ends up in a final 4 or 5, they're worthy, obviously, being in that position. But last year, it was so close between various people, and they were well represented between different states. You had one from Victoria, two from New South Wales, Justin from, of course, Queensland, and then Jenna being the first female auctioneer to actually make a final, which was a big thing as well.
Really big thing, and she was excellent, amazing actually.
Yeah, indeed, and so she's from ACT, so the 5 of them competed. I played a big part or active role because I was told to be responsible for actually writing the script, which often is it's one of the more difficult positions because you get criticized for either making it too easy, too hard, too tricky, it wasn't fair, any excuse. It's normally the scripter's fault for whether someone fails or not. And look, ultimately, I think I got out of it alive, and there was a worthy winner.
Yeah, I can say to you that you were very, very kind to me and got me to do the test auction. What do we call that?
The benchmark auction.
The benchmark auction.
Yeah.
And at the end of that benchmark auction, I was reminded I had not been training, I had not been practicing, and I was reminded, unlike Damien, I won't be making a comeback.
Well, I think once you've gone to a certain stage, I think coming back or not, I think it's just up to your own, I guess, personality and ego, whether you want to chase it.
Yes, well, we'll put the ego aside, but I want to ask, talking about something a little bit different, as you know, people are questioning the competitions. Damien, I want to ask you about the block. I'm sure lots of people talk to you about the block, and this year's, in fact, talking about the Senior Auctioneers competition, the Australasian competition last year, the competitors got to auction the block. It wasn't legitimate auction, it was just for the competition purpose, but they got to walk through the block, but you actually got to auction the real one. Tell everybody, give us an insight into that experience.
Yeah, look, the block's a great experience. One thing I certainly know about the block is that, the auctions can traditionally take anywhere between literally a couple of minutes up to, 30 or 45 minutes. So there's a lot that gets left on the editing floor, but sometimes that's a good thing. It's been a good thing for me a couple of times. You can be either made to look really good or really bad. So I'm quite thankful that the producers have always looked after me on the editing room floor. But it's a great experience. Orders of sale can play a role in how things play out. Last year's block, for example, a lot of people have said, it was mad for the boys to go first. They should have gone later in the order of sale. And when you actually look at the buyer pool and you look at the people who bought and the way that they bid, going last for the boys would have been absolutely the worst thing for them. And I really strongly believe that, and I've assessed this time and time and time again. I've looked back on it, asked myself questions. Them actually going first was the right thing for them, no question about it. And you know what? The way it played out is that the person who ended up, the couple that ended up winning, which weren't one of the favoured couples to win, they did have a very unique property in some respects, and the buyer that ended up buying their property wanted to buy their property. That was their number one goal, was to buy that one. And the person who missed out, that property, incidentally, the person who missed out on the one that won, they were happy to buy that one they missed out on, but they didn't want to pay too much for it. They were preferring to buy one a little bit later in the order. So the way that the order of sale played out for them meant that the one that ended up winning was always going to get a really good price. So the order of sale can have an impact. Obviously, the quality of the renovation and the style of the renovation has an impact. And at the end of the day, if an apartment is in the right spot in the building, or a house is in the most northern part of the block, or one house gets more sun than the other, these are all factors that the buyers take into consideration. So you always hope that the best place and the best position place wins. It's a challenge for the producers, setting the reserve prices correctly. And it's always a challenge for the agents, marketing them. And because at the end of the day, if one buyer inspects one property, they inspect all of them. And it's up to the buyer to determine which property that they prefer. And then hopefully you get the order of sale right and you can win.
Damien, let me ask you, you've conducted some pretty special auctions over the years, some incredibly expensive properties for net wealth individuals. You've done the block auctions. You've told us about your business, Cooley Auctions. Tell me about, how does it compare with the television, the camera? How does all that compare? I'm going to shift this conversation to auctioneering. So as an auctioneer, how does that compare?
Okay. When the camera's on you, you try your best to conduct the auction, but you are mindful of the fact that cameras are watching. And to give you a perfect example, as an auctioneer, it's important to make sure you maintain momentum, keep the flow of the room. It's important that you don't do little things like, you might get quite hot in the room where you're doing the auction for the block, particularly because it's often in quite a closed environment. And I always get nervous before I do a block auction, like really nervous, like sweating, quite nervous. The worst thing that you could do as an auctioneer would be to wipe the sweat off, for example, off your forehead, because rest assured, if the producer wants to, they're going to cut that bit, slow it down in slow motion, and there's going to be this thing on the ad where the auctioneer's going, and it looks terrible, right?
You've had some media training, haven't you? When have you had the media training?
Look, I think for me, it's just about, I guess I've done it enough, and I've probably made enough mistakes to realise, what not to do, and just do your best to do the best job. Look, I always, and Harry will say the same thing, that we, as an auctioneer, you enter every auction to do the best job you can for the vendor in the most respectful way possible to the buyer. And that's really, in essence, that's what it boils down to, I think, for doing a good performance. The differences between auctioning on TV and auctioning somebody's home, I really do see it as, whilst it is different in some respects, you're still selling a property, and it is the same. Like we still have the same role to get the best price for the owner. But because I guess I sell in such varying price ranges, the highest price I've ever sold for a house at auctions, 23 million. And I sold a car space the other day for 90,000 at auction. So I really work in a broad spectrum of market. And for me, it actually makes no difference to me what the value of the property is. It doesn't really make much difference to me what the property is either. I really try and focus on the buyer, why they're buying, and understand.
Let's use that as a segue, because a couple of the key questions I want to get out is I want to know what makes a good auctioneer. We've got some listeners out there that are delighted by the news that we've now can go on site with our auctions. Whilst virtual auctions had their place, the on-site auctions, we know certainly here in Victoria, and we can quiz you about it, Damo, in about New South Wales, but I know in Victoria there's a big movement to go on site very quickly. But let me ask you, what makes a good auctioneer? What should our clients be looking out for? Clearly, I want them to pick me. You want yours to pick you. Harry, likewise.
Yep.
But for those that don't have the choice of us three, what makes a great auctioneer? Over to you, Damien. I'm going to ask the same of you, Harry, so time to think.
I think that it's a really important question. And I think that it's a question that's not often asked of a vendor. And I think a lot of people who are selling their homes almost like, well, this is the agent I want to choose, so I have to just accept whatever auctioneer that they're going to put forward, and maybe they are an auctioneer. So I think that the best advice that I can give anyone thinking about selling is actually go out and do some research and watch some auctions. See who you like. I think what it really comes down to is, an auctioneer doesn't have a lot of time to build rapport between themselves and the buyers. But if you go to an auction and you feel comfortable with an auctioneer's presence, then that's usually a pretty good sign. Watch the way that they run the auction. Listen to some of the words that they use. And I guess at the end of the day, how do they make you feel? If they make you feel good, like they're doing a great job, then that's a really good indicator that person is a good auctioneer, because if you feel good about them, chances are a lot of other people feel good about them. And that's the person you want standing out the front of your home. I think that energy and that feeling they leave the rest of the crowd is something I've heard people say before. It's not all about the vendor. It's not all about the buyer, but how everybody feels as a result of that auctioneering performance. Absolutely.
Yep.
And how much do they actually push for the result? How much, just because a buyer offers you 5,000 doesn't mean you have to take it. Like, do you see the auctioneer pushing back and saying, no, I'm not taking 5, it's got to be 25? Or do you see an auctioneer take 5, but then get the other underbidder to come back in with a $50,000 bid? Like, what's the strategy that the auctioneer is implementing to get the best result for their seller? Like, how much do they push to get the result? And I'll just give you a very quick example. I had an auction on Tuesday night. There was a property in Sydney, in Bellevue Hill, and I could have sold this property fair income 10, 15 times over at 3.9 million. But I pushed and gave time, and I understood that the buyer needed more time, and I really was quite delicate about the person who ended up missing out. Now, I put my hand up and say that my gut feel was they're always going to miss out. But even if my gut feels right or my gut feels wrong, my role is to make sure that they keep bidding. And because I have to get the best out of the other buyer, whoever's going to be the winning bidder. Now, we ended up getting an extra $50,000 for that property, but anyone who was in that room on that night would have walked away from there thinking, gee, that auctioneer really worked hard for that. Like, he really, really got the best result for the owner in the most respectful way to both of the bidders that were bidding against each other. And for me, it's not about, like, the money's great and, I love being a great auctioneer, but walking away from there knowing that the underbidder appreciated the way that I handled it, and the winning bidder was grateful for buying a property and the owner was thrilled with the result. To me, that's what it's all about.
Damien, it's an auctioneer that's pushing. There's probably not a better outcome to know that an auctioneer is going that step further and getting that little bit more for our vendors. Harry, I'm going to go to you. It's a big question.
Yep.
We all know it's a huge question, and Damien's answered it in a big way and pushing for that extra money. But what makes a great auctioneer? What do you believe our listeners should be looking out for in their auctioneers?
Well, look, ultimately, I think what Damien mentioned was really important. Owners should go out there and do some observations of their own. I'm a big believer of energy, just in general. Forget about auctions, but in general. I think inside, your gut instinct would always be guiding you generally the right way. But if you talk about, I guess, some skill sets or technical aspects, I think as an auctioneer, one of the biggest things that we can provide not only is understanding of every client's different positions. So you can have multiple buyers, but they could be in different positions. They could have different mindsets. They could actually be utilizing different tactics during the auction itself. And as an auctioneer, you've got to be very flexible. I think there's no one size fits all. You've got to be able to read the play. You've got to be able to adjust in the heat of the moment. You've got to be able to go, you know what, as an auctioneer, my gut feeling is telling me that, yes, that person does have a little bit more. You also got to not just read the play, but also lead the play too. I think as an auctioneer, you should be in control of the auction. Sometimes I've witnessed auctioneers that have maybe let buyers dictate how the auctions are run, or maybe even had the owner tell the auctioneer how things are run. But I think as a really, really good auctioneer is to be able to understand, okay, so this is the environment. I'm reading everything between every single element of the auction, whether it be the crowd, whether it be the buyers, whether it be the owner, whether it be the agents, and be able to kind of oversee everything and then make a critical, in the heat of the moment, judgment, and not just roll on with it, but do it in a way where it's professional, where certainly it's engaging with people, and making sure that we're ultimately still looking after our clients, which is the vendor, but also to our buyers, because we want to make sure that they walk away, even if they miss out, they walk away knowing that, I was very happy with that auction itself.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you both with those, hearing the passion and hearing that pushing for that little bit more, and understanding the importance of looking for that within your auctioneer. But one thing that I wanted to just highlight, I know that in today's day and age, we buy cars that have got these lane change assist and airbags all over them, and they've got cameras and radars, and they've got all this technology, which largely we don't want to use. We want to make sure that technology is there just in case. And I'd like to think that our listeners, and this is just my view on what we should look for in an auctioneer, is a great auctioneer with those experiences and knowledges and the empathy and pushing harder and have the passion. You may not always need to use it, but there's a comfort in knowing that that individual, whether it's a he or she, whether it's one of us or somebody in their area, has that ability to draw upon that skill if needed. And that's a view that I've had for some time. And that experience, be it broad, and experience doesn't necessarily mean years and years and years. It just means you need to churn some auctions and have those experiences under your belt. It's been a really insightful conversation. Guys, and I just knew I was running the risk of getting two auctioneers in a room. Both of you have got a story. Both of you have shared lots with us. And I just knew we were going to push for time. Before I wrap up, before I thank you both, can you share, Harry, can you share a little bit of a story, something unique that's happened to you at one of your auctions? Share it with our listeners and what you did. Now, I run the risk this could be a long answer, but do your best.
Well, actually try to think. A unique situation.
Fire away.
Well, I mean, okay, so just trying to feel. Look, even just recently, something quite unique, of course, with the online bidding, especially in Melbourne, it was really not that, common, and registrations for, bidding is not that common either. So, like, for me, unique is to, given, of course, the COVID situation, to see, registrations from bidders that not only were present, in this occasion anyway, registrations were present, but also too, there were online bidders as well. And to be able to, I think, connect with people that are, say, over the screen or when they're bidding online it takes something very different than connecting with people that are, of course, on the floor. And I think the adjustment period for me, it was quite unique just to be able to, with these people on the floor, I can see them, I can feel them, I can hear them, I can see them whispering with each other. I can, see that they could be a little bit nervous or, even understanding what they're saying, even if they're speaking English or maybe Chinese in that circumstance. Then there's a bidder online which you know nothing of, and all they are doing and all they can ever show you is just the actual number that they put in. Right, and so it's almost like, and it's
pretty dry, isn't it?
It is pretty dry. So for me to be, quite emotional one way with, the people that are in front of me that are on the floor and going about it in one manner. Once they became the highest bidder, and then I went to the the phone or this live stream and actually try to talk with the bidder over the line and to try to engage with them, it just felt like it was a one-way street. Like, as in, I was just talking blank. I just don't know whether they were hearing it, whether they just muted me. I have no idea, but I was just blabbing on and blabbing on. But ended up working it out okay. Like, the result was actually pretty good given the times. But for me, that was quite unique. If you go back years and years, there's probably other unique stories, like including, for example, disturbances. You always get, the Mr. or Mrs. Know-it-alls that come in and try to, throw you off.
Hecklers. Yeah, did you get some hecklers?
Hecklers. You also have, family members. Say, for example, if it was a marital situation, and they'll come in and try to, affect maybe try to stuff you around or try to put you off. But then once again, that's when good auctioneers stand out. Where you just got to be level-headed. Sometimes you just got to ignore them. You got to, embrace the environment and just push forward.
How about you, Damo? I think you'd have a bucket load of stories. Can you give us a short one?
Well, one that just came to mind when the moment you asked that question, I just had this vision of this guy passing out at my auction. So he didn't pass out once; he passed out twice. So the auction was in a property in Surrey Hills. The name of the street escapes me, but he was bidding against one of my clients who was bidding for someone else, Jane Schumann. And this gentleman was there with his mum. It wasn't a young guy. It was, I don't know, mid-30s, might have even been early 40s. And he was bidding, and the moment must have really come over him. And he literally, I saw his legs starting to shake, and I thought, is this guy okay? And he actually dropped to the ground, and I didn't know what to do because he had the bid, right? And Jane bid, the agent then bid, and I took her bid, and I was like, I actually don't know what to do here. So we obviously got him a glass of water, and he was fine. And he stood up, and I said, are you okay? And his mum said, he's okay. And he bid again. I was like, I don't know whether I should be taking this or not. So I did end up taking his bid again, and Jane then bid again, and the guy passed out again. So we ended up having to. He was okay. We offered obviously to call an ambulance and do all that sort of stuff, but he said he was totally fine. His mum was there, and she said he was fine. So incidentally, he didn't end up buying the property, but it was an interesting experience from an auctioneer's point of view, of like knowing, should I take this person's bid or shouldn't I? Should I stop the auction? Should I start the auction again? Look, in the end, the right result came out on the day. But I guess, further what Harry said, and I think you make a really good point, Adrian, about you need to know that you've got the right person doing the auction when situations present themselves, that you need someone with that experience, someone that has had a situation happen before, or someone that knows how to handle a legal situation. And yeah, I mean, you name it, I've had it happen to me.
Yeah, I think after a few years, we all get those experiences and we get to see some of those unusual circumstances, and we learn from the way that we deal with them. I'm delighted by both your stories. Thank you. I know there's not enough time. We didn't get through half of the questions I planned to get through, but it was so good having you both along. Colleagues of mine that I've competed with, we've shared green rooms together, and we've a bit of sweat in those back rooms there. I've certainly, like Damien, raised a bit of a sweat at some of those competitions, particularly. Not so much. I haven't had the block opportunity, but guys. Harry, Damien, thank you so much for coming along. I'm really, really pleased. Damien, you've got an auction training course coming up. I played the video earlier on our stream. Can you give us a quick insight into that auction course? Tell us about that.
The auction coaches is on Friday the 12th of June, and it goes from 1 till 3 p.m. I'm really excited about listening to Trent Robinson, who's the Sydney Roosters coach, be interviewed by John McGrath. I think that leadership and those qualities that Trent displays as a rugby league coach, I'm really personally looking forward to listening to. I'm also looking forward to listening to the auctioneers that we have speaking at the conference, and also keen to get some insights from people like Dan White and the Ray White Group, who have been instrumental in the auctioning of property over many years. And then to also get a bit of a rebut of that from someone like a Shannon Whitney from Bresic Whitney, which is a business that has since COVID took place, really went heavy on the whole off-market transactions and not being on market. So I think viewers are going to get really good insights right across the board, not just for auctioneers, but for real estate agents to understand more about, why we auction, how we auction, and really what it takes to be a great leader.
Well, mate, thank you very much. I can see Facebook Live is a handful, and I'm sure there are auctioneers watching this, so they've taken that on board, and I'm absolutely certain. So I want to thank you both. Thank you so much, Harry. Thanks for making your way across Melbourne. I don't know if you want to go home in a hurry. I think there's an incident on the Monash, so you can just take your time on that. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Real Estate Story. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes or Spotify. We look forward to seeing you next week.
The Real Estate Story brought to you by Compton Green.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks, mate.
All good. Pleasure. Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Thanks,
We went
Harry.
a little over time, but that was, I think, always going to happen.
Thanks, Damo.
No,
Good to hear
that's
again,
okay.
mate.
No problem.
Yep.
All right. See you
Take
guys.
care. See ya.
See ya. Bye.
See you, mate.